Hello, welcome to Grow at IETF 121. If you're not here for Grow or the Global Routing Working Group, Routing Operations Working Group, maybe you're in the wrong room. You could stay. It's probably going to be a great conversation anyway. I'm Chris. This is Yob. We're the chairs. That's the pub. Just down the way is my hotel. For those that are come up and speak, you can either use the don't turn it off. Use the mic like this. You could lower it if you need to, or raise it if you need to. You can pick the mic up and walk around and hold it. But if you do this, people can't hear you. That's because I'm loud. But please keep the mic in front of your face, preferably in front of your mouth. It'll make everybody happier. Okay. I think, is the mic in the...
Testing, yep.
Ah, perfect. Now you go.
So yeah, welcome everyone. Appreciation for all the remote attendees in different time zones across the globe. We enjoy your presence remotely. We have a note well. The letters are really small, but essentially it means be nice to each other, be respectful to each other, no ad hominems or other fallacies. We'll be monitoring for that. Here are some resources related to the Grow Working Group. You can view the slides online in your browser if you go to the topmost URL. We have a mailing list. If you're interested in global routing operations, please subscribe to the mailing list. And there's a chat room on Zulip that I will be monitoring throughout this session. Make sure to scan the QR code. This helps us plan the size of the meeting room the next time. I should get scanned somewhere. All right.
You're at the mic.
Yep. We need a minute taker. Is Warren Kumari volunteering? Yeah. Warren, thank you for your services. I will be the Jabber scribe and monitor the chat room. So let's move on to the agenda. We have a packed agenda this session, but if there's a little bit of time at the end, Thomas requested to give an update on results from the hackathon. No promises that we'll get that far. So with that, let's start. Yisun, it's your turn to talk about BMP over Quick. Let me put up your slides.
Oh, just pull it straight toward you. Oh, pull it straight toward you like this. Yep, or that.
I hope the clicker works.
Is it connected to your machine? Yeah, you got to plug it into your machine.
Oh, my machine does not support that.
Yeah.
It's not working.
Maybe it works on yours.
Well, it's not gonna. I don't have that on. How about you just say click, and we'll click.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Apologies.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yisun Liu from China Mobile, and today I will introduce the using the BMP over quick connection, and I will present on behalf of my co-authors with Changwang and Thomas. Next, please.
Oh, you logged in from another device, my friend. One moment.
Here we go. Press that button.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, it works.
That's fine. Firstly, why does the BMP need Quake? There are two parts. The first one is that the high efficiency, and the Quake supports the multiple simultaneous streams to carry the data, and which allowing each stream to transmit the data concurrently. And the BMP connection can be divided to the multiple streams that can divide multiple stream channels according to the peer information. It can avoid the head of line blocking and improve the overall performance. And the second part is that enhance the security. And the Quick can provide the transport security with the built-in encryption and authentication. And the Quick unidirectional stream consists with the message transmission mechanism of the BMP. It also can protect against the attacks from the station to the router. And for the connection management, the first part is the connection establishment. And the BMP over Quick can support by selecting LPN in the TLS handshake. And the monitor router act as the client, and the monitoring station act as the server. And the monitor router should be the initiator, and the station act as the acceptor. And the second part for the connection termination, we will keep the Quick connection persistent even if the BMP station is idle. So the BMP monitoring station close the BMP session when receiving the termination message. And the router will send the termination message when detecting the interruption of the Quick connection. For the stream mapping and usage, this is an important part of this BMP over Quick. And for the unidirectional stream, so because no BMP message is ever sent from the monitoring station to the monitor router, so the BMP messages from the monitor router should be mapped into unidirectional stream. So for the multiple stream selection, and because a large number of routes from the many peers, which need to be transmitted from the router to the station. So in order to reduce the communication pressure and improve the communication efficiency, so multiple streams can be allocated according to the number of pairs. And each stream is used to transfer a BMP message of the specified pairs, like the picture in the slide. And for example, the stream 1 corresponding to the pair 1 and pair 2, and the stream N corresponding to the pair X and the pair Y. And for each stream transmit the BMP message to the peer insensitive message to ensure the order of the BMP messages, including the initiation message and the termination message, and the cache server that means the monitoring station should consider the first received message as valid in the multiple message and from the multiple the streams. So for the other considerations, firstly for the endpoint authentication, we can use the quick handshake authentication, or we can use the third-party authentication. And for the operational considerations, we can provide a configuration mechanism to enable BMP over quick on the BMP session. And or if failing to establish a quick connection, the router should attempt to establish the traditional TCP-based BMP session. And for the INA considerations and the BMP over quick, like the BGP or a netcom over quick, then it will registration for the LPN protocol IDs. That's the details in this slide. So that's all. Thank you.
Paolo Lucente, NTT. I welcome this effort, very nice. Me and my colleague Camilo Cardona, we were also thinking about BMP over quick, but you guys came first. We were going in a slightly different direction, we were really thinking about probably a coordination channel for the peer ups and peer down, and then a data channel, and maybe the coordination channel can be used also for validate that you get the peer up for then the subsequent data stream, which is typical problem that we get in BMP. Sometimes the peer up is missing and you just get some data and things like that. And probably, I don't know, coordination channel because you have different data. So because you have data and let's say control. So essentially just saying that if you want, we can talk later. We can synchronize, maybe harmonize our ideas.
Yeah, like yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. Thank you.
Maria.
Maria, developer of BERT. Excuse me, what's the actual problem you are trying to resolve? Because what I can see in the BMP is you don't run BMP sessions over the open internet at all, because it's a generally bad idea. You are basically enabling anybody to mess with the session, and if anybody messes with the session, even by throwing away the packets, you are getting the routers into trouble. And I haven't seen any implementation of BMP which would handle this situation correctly, even in BERT. And well, we are fixing it now. So you basically don't need the security part of Quick. And considering the rest, well, the problem isn't that there is some collision or some queuing. The problem is that the receivers are sometimes stuck, and you don't do anything with the stuck receiver. So it won't be resolved by Quick. You are just going to send more messages and they may be dropped, or what? What's the problem you are trying to resolve?
Okay, I can't catch all of your key points, and then we will discuss offline.
If I can summarize, I think Maria indicated that the security benefits might not be super helpful, but then again, you argued that the advantage of BMP over Quick could be avoidance of head-of-line blocking. So I would recommend to take this topic to the mailing list. John Scudder remotely is first in queue, and I will encourage people to be concise and short because we're starting to run over time. John.
I'll be as short as I can. Yeah. So just to repeat my comment from the chat, your proposal to send the certain messages, the control messages over each stream, and then consider the first one received to be authoritative, kind of looks to me as though it creates a potential for a race condition. And I suspect that if you sit down with Paolo and you know, Paolo said that the way that he was thinking about it was to have a separate control channel, which I think would fix the problem. So my request is just please think about race conditions when revising the proposal. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jeffrey Haas is next.
I'll try also to be brief. So thanks for your presentation. Hopefully you are familiar with the BGP over Quick proposal as well. You will find the number of the things in that proposal probably addresses a number of the concerns that people have. To be very brief, comment to Maria, the security properties are actually a desirable thing in some circumstances. There's parallel work to provide TCP/AO coverage to BMP. And fundamentally, we're just looking at secure transports. Authentication may also be a useful property. It's not a key property, obviously, for most people. The headline blocking is not usually the main consideration for BMP implementations. Normally, TCP doesn't get in the way. It's simply the producer is not able to make things go fast, or the receiver is not able to absorb it fast enough. And as far as the streams go, again, please see the BGP over BMP stuff. I'm happy to take a look at this with you. What you'll find is that you'll need to take your individual address families as a minimum multiplexing criteria, and you have to keep the same address family in the same peering session on a stream consistently. If you don't, you have out of order issues, and BMP is, just like BGP, stateful. Thank you.
Right, final comment, Thomas?
Yeah, Thomas Graf, so on the control channel, I think that would be very useful. After BMP peer up, peer down on a separate channel. And another reason is harmonizing the network telemetry protocol. Right now, every protocol has a different transport. That would help to simplify the data collection side. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So next up, we have Yinming Li with BMP BGP RIP stats. You can't?
Says all slots are taken. Slides. Okay.
You got it?
Yes.
Okay.
So which one is it? BMP.
BMP
Okay.
stats.
Well. Okay.
Do you want to run your own slides instead of me?
Myself is okay.
One more time. Which one?
BMP stats.
Stats.
BMP.
Okay. Great. There we go.
All right, take it away.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy on behalf of my co-authors. My presentation is about the application for IANA code points of the new statistical types in the BMP protocol. Okay, next, please. The statistical types messages of the BMP protocol are used by monitoring station to watch for interesting things that happen on routers. They can be set off by events or by timers going off regularly. The old message types only had simple stats related to ribbing, but in this draft we have added more kinds of stats to meet different needs. We have made the ribbing stats in the draft better and also added stats for reboot and the results of RPKI verification. And we have already presented this at the past 3 IETF meetings. So next, please. Next, please. The update of version 05 draft is mainly about the update of IANA code points. Thanks to Jeff for his reminder and promotion, which have enabled us to know how to move the draft forward. Currently, we have already applied to IANA and passed their review. As you can see, the statistical types, including the number of routes in pre-policy ribbing, post-policy ribbing, and the number of routes rejected and accepted by the inbound policy, the number of routes marked as inactive, and so on. Next, please. Is still the newly added statistical types. Include the number of routes with different RPKI verification results, the number of routes that exceed the S-pass length limit, and the number of routes that exceed the limits allowed by the license. And next, please. I think we have added a total of 26 statistical types to the draft. If anyone is interested in the detail, they can check the draft or the IANA website for BMP parameter allocation. Next, please. Okay, next steps, we hope to get more feedback from the WG, like comments from the mailing list. And this will help us define the statistical types more accurately. Also, the code points we applied for this time are valid until October 18th, 2025. So we plan to start the last call process after getting the opinion of the working group. And that's all. Please pay attention and give us more feedback. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? I have one small comment myself. In order to progress to last call, it would be very helpful if the 06 version of the draft includes a implementation status section, so that the working group has a bit of an idea of what the current state of implementation is for these statistics types. All right. Oh, we have somebody in the queue. Jeff?
Yep, no surprise. The conversation here is very much the one that we brought up the last couple of times this has been presented. We're looking for a way to just simply provide a level of working group review for the code points here. They can be requested first come, first serve. The trouble is that means that there's a disincentive to arrive at common counters of things. We hit the flip side of the equation, which is it became a working group document. Things sort of got stalled up. We had to push a little bit harder to get the code points assigned. Great, thank you for making that happen. The question becomes a matter of cadence. When we do these sorts of things, the pattern we should hopefully be seeing is, somebody introduces a draft or adds to an existing draft, some counter, it gets some level of working group review. If it's gotten at least some level of review, we should simply move forward with the assignment. I agree with you that implementation status before we RFC the thing would be a lovely piece of the process as well. That's it.
All right, thank you. Next up, Mr. Alexander Asimov to talk about the use of DSCP fields and corresponding specifications.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Azimov. I work for Younger, and today I'd like to discuss with you the theory and practice of operations of DSCP field. So let's start with the basics. We know that DSCP field is 6 bits long, and there are some ECN bits around, but I will not speak about them during this presentation. And so 6 bits gives us 64 options for zeros and ones. So we have 64 combinations. How we should use them? Let's start with the theory. During next slides, I will briefly cover RFCs that allocated code points at IANA. The first one is 2474. It defines 8 classes of DSCP using the elder bits. So it's pretty simple, and we get used to this. Next year was published RFC 2497. It's defined a probability of drop. So it's defined low drop probability, medium drop probability, and high drop probability, and corresponding code points with low order bits. Next one was RFC 3248. That was speaking about that for some applications there is a need in what is called expedited forwarding. Behind this wording is that some applications may need low loss, low jitter, and low delay options. The next one was RFC 5865. That also allocated another code point in CS5 class for was voice over IP traffic. And the last one was RFC 8622. That's according to some measurements that were did from, as far as I remember, 3 vantage points. They proved that for bulk traffic, it's better to use not CS1, but 0.00001 code point. As a result, we have, as far as I remember, 23 code points allocated by IANA for different classes of traffic. And there are an elephant in the room. If you open any of these documents, press Ctrl F and enter in the search line MPLS, there will be 0 results. Why is it important? Because whatever control plane you are using inside your MPLS core, for quality of service, you normally use experimental bits that are only 3 bits available. So it's only 8 code points with 23 from IANA. And there is another problem. Majority of modern switches, it's not a limitation of the software, it's a limitation of hardware, normally have 8 physical keys for unicast for each port. So it perfectly matches what we see in the MPLS, but not that good if we compare it what we have in IANA. So, and now you are engineers. You need to define course in your administrative domain. What choice do you have? Just ignore what is writing in the RFCs and do it your own. Here is an example. In this particular example, you can see how DCP classes were used to isolate traffic from the bulk traffic, the DC traffic, the inter-DC traffic, the user traffic, and also the lowest bit was used for marking scene retransmits for the monitoring purposes. And this was enforced by remarking at the edge. By the edge, I mean both border routers and servers. And it was working for a while. Until one day when duty engineers told me that our monitoring system got mad. The reason was that one of our internal services decided to update the software. And with the new release, there was a change in the internal marking that was done in code, of course. And it started marking packets as it was suggested in the last RFC as 0000001. Which made a funny interference with my monitoring signals. Fortunately, we had already eBPF hooks at hand, and there was an easy way just to ignore whatever your application is trying to set in these fields on the socket level. So it works for us. But I brought this topic for this working group for a reason. So this working group is about operations. And for me, it seems that what we really using in our networks and what is writing in the RFCs is a bit different. The real specification can be quite simple. We may say that we have three elder bits for querying. We can use the last three for any kind of ASIL marking, for example, for monitoring. And there are also a couple of questions. So we can restrict or clearly state that clause has meaning only inside administrative domain. There is no end-to-end clause between application and end user. We may ask software developers to stop putting code points in their code, or at least make it configurable at the user space. And there's a question what we should do that with old and well-known RFCs that doesn't match reality. There is other option, of course. We can just keep ignoring it and leave the joy of discovery for future generations. So I would love to know what you think about this subject. Thank you.
Two minutes, any questions? Warren, Kumar.
I mean, I might or might not agree. Oh, sorry, Warren Kumari, Google. I might or might not agree with you, but I don't really think that it's work to be done in Grow. I don't know where it would be done. This feels more like int area or transport or something. Like, look where the other documents were done, and I think discuss it there because it's not really global routing.
I have no idea for which working group it's better fits. My question right now is, if we are worried about it, if we're okay with what is happening with the RFC documents at their state.
I mean, I know a lot of, maybe it's not written up, but I know a lot of networks just like overwrite DSCP as they enter and then overwrite them again when they leave. Maybe it's not documented as a thing, but that's what people seem to do.
Okay.
Ben Madison, Work Online. I think if this were to be done, I think Grow's not a terrible fit actually, because it's kind of a coordination problem. It's not a protocol specification problem. I kind of feel like working out that DSCP bits are not useful on the internet is a bit of a rite of passage for people. I don't know what we would write about other than to say this isn't useful on the internet. Go do your own thing if you think that there's something internal to your network that you need to do.
The simplest message can be just the CP field is meaningful only in your administrative domain. Strip it when it's travels beyond your network, so at inter-IS level. It's kind of best kind of practice or something like this.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the problem is that's only kind of partially true because you also have like, you know, coordination with other ASs sometimes and that's maybe only a single administrative domain for the purposes of a particular service that you're offering to a particular customer. I just don't think that there's enough of a generally right answer to this to be able to write down anything sensible beyond it's probably not going to work the way that you think it's going to work, but how it is going to work just depends. It's not obvious to me what we would say usefully on this topic, other than you probably don't want to do what the other RFCs seem to be saying.
Okay, there is another option, just obsolete the old ones and just make it less conflicting with reality. Because what was affecting my operations was that the developers was just reading what is writing in the RFCs and okay, we will follow. And this is kind of a problem, which was writing in these RFCs. Of course, it's not applicable in general. It's mostly affecting what we can call private or public clouds. But it might also affect transit networks because quality of service is what you are selling to your customers.
Well, for us, I mean, so I operate a transit network, and the right answer to this question ended up for us just being there is no sane way of differentiating different classes of traffic for customers, even between customers or within customers. And the right answer ended up being drop it into a single queue and try not to oversubscribe anything. But as I say, that's us. That's because we're not the endpoint for any TCP connections.
And you see that what you are doing is not related to what is done in the RFCs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree with your premise. I just don't think that there's a solution.
Okay, I got your point. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Joe Abley next. You want to drive the slides yourself, Joe? You're a robot.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing, so if you could do the slide, that'd be
You
great.
may want to restart your browser. All right, Joe, we're going to come back later to you. And while you figure out your audio issues, I would like to invite the peering API folks.
Arturo?
Arturo, yep.
Oops.
Okay, how about now?
Oh.
Okay.
Much better, thank you.
Is that good? Okay, good. Magic of Chrome. So yeah, Chris, I was saying if you could drive the slides, that'd be great, because I'm not sure I know how to do it.
Okay.
So next slide. So I'm here, my colleague at Cloudflare, Algin Martin, and I came up with this thing. This relates to some work that we're trying to do. I'll go very quickly over the first couple of slides. I feel like this is not news to anybody in this room, but at Cloudflare, we allow people to bring their own addresses and link them to services that we provide. And we call this in a cloud environment, BYOIP. What you call it in normal networks is being a network operator. So we have the basic problem that customers are bringing us addresses, and we need to make sure that we're authorized to announce them on their behalf. We're not actually complicit in hijacking somebody else's routes. So we have some checks to do. And ideally, these checks would be robust and useful and straightforward and automatable. Next slide. So what we actually do, without going into enormous detail, is we do a bunch of kind of reasonable sounding checks, every one of which is flawed. Like we look at company names in RAR data, which are usually wrong. And we look at route objects, which customers usually get wrong. And we look at what's been announced now and what has been announced in the past. And we have LOAs, which are not especially great. And we also have, in some cases, we have people who actually publish RPKI signed objects, which we can actually use more reasonably. Next slide. And so once we've authorized or decided that we're authorized to announce a prefix, then we onboard it, which means we just make changes in a database, which ultimately will trigger some kind of advertisement from an edge router somewhere in Cloudflare, and traffic will start to flow in the opposite direction. So that part is straightforward, but the other part, which is really the subject of this proposal, is that we have to also persuade our adjacent network operators, our peers, our transit providers, that the route that we're advertising is not a mistake, but in fact, they should accept it from us. This is reasonable. So yeah, so next slide. So the process that we're following today is kind of awful. Most of the things we're checking are not trivial to check. They're ambiguous. They're ambiguous signals that we are asking people who are largely unqualified to review in order to do a sort of mechanical yet manual onboarding process. There's lots of back and forth with the customer because customer has no idea what the internet routing registry is, and they don't understand how any of this stuff works. And they look at the Whois server and they say, look, the Whois server, and they send us a screen grab and something inside me dies. And it's all a dreadful, dreadful situation. And it would be much, much better to have something that was robust enough that we could automate it and not have to have all this back and forth going on, which makes everybody sad. Next slide. So what we are hoping to do is use things, RPKI signed objects and an ability to check validity of those objects to be able to find out whether we're authorized to do something. So for example, we might get a customer who comes to us and says, here is a prefix, please originate it from a Cloudflare AS. And if the customer has published a rower, then we might decide, okay, that's good enough. That's good enough to say that we should announce it. We still have some checks to do to make sure that this is the right customer and we're not accidentally hijacking some other customer of Cloudflare's routes, for which signed checklists might be useful. Sometimes customers come and they say, we want you to originate this route, but we want you to originate it from our AS number, in which case we also have to make sure that that adjacency is reasonable. And maybe we can use signed ASPA objects for that. But the thing is, after we've gone through all this process, even if we've done all of this with RPKI and it's robust and it's fantastic and it was all automatable, we still, as Cloudflare, have to tell our adjacent network operators, our peers and transit providers, that we are authorized to do this, some of whom still expect us to email bits of PDF with Photoshop letterheads and things like that in it. And so we have to have something to send them. And we don't want to be in the business of sending them junk. We'd rather send them something useful. So next slide. So that's what this document is all about. If we were going to authorize, if we're going to decide that we're authorized to originate a prefix on behalf of a customer, and we don't want them to send us an LOA, and we don't need them to send us an LOA because we think LOAs are garbage and it's a pain point for everybody, and we would rather just use RPKI. But we still have to send something that looks like a LOA to our adjacent network operators. What do we send them? And so this document is proposing something that we could send those peers and transit providers to let them know this is fine. Next slide. So the document that we've put up as a 00 is, I would say it's not a great document, but it is something. It tries to frame the problem. It tries to propose a solution. It tries to propose that an LOA substitute be constructed in such a way that it's useful for a human to read, and it explains exactly what's going on. And we try and leave the door open to being able to send these things and construct them in multiple languages, because not the whole world speaks English. We use the rather contrived example in the draft of a message sent in Dutch, as if there is anybody in the Netherlands who speaks English worse than I do. So, maybe that's a terrible example, but we're doing our best to be international. So the reason for bringing it here is that we think there are some benefits to having this standardized in some very loose version of the word standardized. We think it's nice to have a convention that could be recognizable, so that when someone sends you something like this, you don't have to worry whether it's legit. You can say, no, actually, this is how we do this. This is how we construct an LOA in a situation where reasonably we don't need an LOA. And the receiver of this LOA should still do checks themselves. They shouldn't believe anything in the document, but it's a signal that says you can just use something like RPKI to check this stuff. You don't have to trust us. And in such a way that it's recognizable and useful. So our thought was to Grow seems like a good place for this. It's kind of, this is the edge of global operations, unless you happen to have a global network. But we think it's operational, and we think there's some benefit in making this consistent. So my closing question, just to anticipate towards the end before we get to the mic queue, is this something that people think is reasonable for Grow to look at? That's it.
And with that, we open up the queue.
Joe, it's Ben from Work Online.
Hi, Ben.
I'm a little surprised to hear that you're still having to ship around LOAs to your peers in your transits, to be honest. We just say no and turn off the session if necessary. But insofar as that's actually, it's something that you guys are needing to do, I'm wondering what, so I think that there is I think there is a gap, even aside from kind of whether or not we think LOAs are necessary. I think there is a fundamental gap that RPKI today doesn't fill, which is the role that we're currently using the routing registries for. Because there are properties of the way that we validate ROAs and the way that they expire that makes them not great substitutes for root objects in certain respects. And I think that that is a legit problem that we haven't fully worked out. And I suspect there's some overlap from a process perspective in the kind of stuff you're trying to solve there. So I think that's the first point I'd make. I think insofar as you want to kind of wrap some text in a signature, which you can cryptographically associate with an AS number probably, I think that checklists are a pretty natural fit for that. And I think that this is maybe, there's a kind of conversation going on about are checklists specified in such a way that the use to which a specific checklist object is intended to be put kind of explicitly enough indicated in the object itself to avoid kind of like subtleties and kind of overlapping use cases where you could potentially replay a checklist created for one purpose towards another recipient. And I think this is maybe a good kind of working example for that. I think thinking through whether we need a totally new signed object as opposed to a way of encoding in a checklist, this is an LOA and it's intended for receipt by this particular network, I think probably solves most of what you're describing.
So I think three things I heard. First of all, yeah, we still have peers and transit providers who expect bits of PDF, and we still have customers who don't do RPKI. So we have, I guess, an ongoing need to send bits of crayon-colored logo towards people, and this is an attempt to see. So imagine that we do have a use case for this. The second part was with the IRR. So we are, at the moment, we consume data from the IRR as part of the heuristics we use to decide whether what the customers ask for is reasonable. We want to switch that around. We want to publish what we're doing in RPSL, but not use it to authorize whether or not we should do it in the first place. So we want to publish the objects on behalf of the customer, but not use those to adjust them. So we're not looking to replace those things. We imagine people still want to use those things. And the third thing is, I think you have not read this document, which is entirely fair. But I'm not actually proposing anything that's cryptographically signed as an object to be passed around the place. I'm talking about something that is as plain text as an existing LOA. It's just got a particular format in it that makes sense, and it invites people to do their own verification of particular ROAs or ASPAs or whatever. It's not trying to carry a signature itself, which would then require a tool chain. We think that's too heavyweight for something that hopefully is a transitory migration type method to a world where we all use RPKI and don't need LOAs at all.
I see. Okay, you're right that I haven't read the draft, and the title tripped me up.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's a bad title.
Ben, we gotta allow other people some microphone time.
Untitled Liberty Global. I just want to join the previous speaker. I get the feeling you're trying to circumvent security measures here, right? When you want to publish something that the resource holder is not able to do, you want to do it for them. So where do you get that authority from? The questions I actually had was, if we cannot convince a customer to create a ROA and to create a route object, what makes you believe that they will understand that they need to sign a LOA?
So again, I'm not suggesting that anybody should sign a LOA. And this is specifically for customers who have published ROAs or ASPAs or whatever. We want to make it possible for a customer that has published RPKI signed objects to be able to automatically be onboarded to Cloudflare without having to send us any PDFs or talk to salespeople or anything else like that. We want to allow them to do it through an API and make this entirely automatable. However, we are very aware that as soon as we give the whole internet of people an API to be able to originate routes, we will be the #1 vehicle for hijacking everything. So we're very much trying to make this robust. And we think that what we're trying to do is ultimately way more secure than messing around with the current manual process, which is filled with potentials for error.
So it's more an automation question than it is trying to circumvent the already existing measures, right?
Exactly. It's not trying to circumvent anything. It's saying that if we eliminate the manual processes that we think are insecure and error prone and replace them with something robust, which is based on RPKI, we still have this corner case to be able to deal with for people who are not ready to consume and do their own validation with RPKI. This is filling that gap.
In that case, I want to offer you, how we do it. And that is, we do expect a ROA to RAS when we originate a prefix. And we do expect a route object from our BGP customers, right?
Yeah.
So that we can create a filter list.
Yeah, I think this is covered in the draft. So if you have a chance to read it, I really welcome your review. Rudiger.
I think it's Jeff.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. So Joe, I think you have a couple of parallel problems. You have authentication, you have authorization, you have making this stuff published in some place that people can get at it, and you have the contents of the LOA effectively. I don't think Grow is actually useful for working on most of these. So from the document standpoint, this is almost maybe a W3C or some other similar type organization in terms of defining a structured document for this sort of thing. Certainly IETF, you could do that sort of thing if you want to come up like a JSON format, XML format. But I think that most of the considerations aren't going to be the structure of the document. It's going to be legal considerations. And IETF's terrible at that sort of thing. Other organizations do better. So that piece, I recommend, talk to your lawyers, talk to your tech people and figure out something that makes sense that probably isn't IETF is my guess. Second piece is once you actually have done all that, the authentication criteria, as I was mentioning in chat, is an awful lot like how things used to look like back in the original web PKI days. You used to have to go to VeriSign, you have to provide an awful lot of stuff that is exactly the type of thing that you're talking about for onboarding your peers. And they used to insist on ID, etc. So in terms of your willingness to trust a given party for actually testing to this document contains correct stuff, again, that's the tech has been there for ages. You just have to decide if the procedure actually lines up with stuff. I suspect you have enough history to know this yourself, but also talk to the ancients about why we transitioned out of this, and maybe how for this piece of the process you might want to push things back that direction. But once you've gone that direction for authorization, you've identified that, yes, you're expecting these things will already have RPKI existing presence, things like register your ROAs or let us do it for you. You may insist on having an ASPA object registered towards you as a provider if they're doing their own announcements. The last sort of piece you're looking for is you want to be able to decorate the LOA for the audience that needs to see it with some of the information from the IRR. That is a relatively boring signature piece. That piece could belong in IETF. The place I'm going to give you one bit of feedback is that this is information that the LOA itself probably doesn't belong in the RPKI. It's like who wants to basically do the let's store our cat pictures inside a blockchain inside the RPKI type picture. We want to actually maybe give references to stuff that have signatures on it, and then the parties that care about it can use it. Please consider how do you avoid littering the RPKI as you do this work. Thanks.
So I see Chris waving. I would really appreciate it, Jeff, if you could read the document, because I think I've done a bad job at presenting it, and it was only submitted relatively recently. It's very understandable you haven't read it, but I think you're suggesting that I'm trying to do something that I'm not.
Okay.
If we could take it to the list, that'd be fantastic. But we don't need to take more time to talk about that now. But I really appreciate your review.
Thanks.
Our apologies to people standing in the queue, but we have to stick to our schedule. Joe, thank you so much for this presentation, and I look forward to continue discussing on the mailing list. Arturo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, my name is Arturo Servín. I work at Google. I'm presenting our work to automate a peering API or to automate the peering turn-up. This is the agenda. For the people that we have presented this like a few times. I think this is the fourth or third time that we are presenting this. For the ones that are new for this discussion, basically what we want is to have an API or standardize a format for an API to do peering turn-ups. Initially, we are focused on public peering because it's much easier because you already have the layer 2, you already have connectivity. So it's just a matter of turn up a BGP session. We also want to address private PNIs, private peering, but that is a little bit more complicated because you have a negotiation there that who is going to pay the cross connection, who is going to provide the IPs. Also, you need to test the physical interface of the routers. So it becomes a little bit more complicated. We don't know if we are going to address it yet in this draft, if it's adopted by the working group, or if we set up a second or a version 2 with specifically the private API, because it's, to me and for the authors, it's completely a different monster to do PNIs. Basically, that's the work. Also, we can, with the API, request the connection, like, hey, I want to peer with you. Also, you can list the location where the other or the peer is there, and also decide if you want to peer in those locations, and also delete any bilateral that you already have. Why is this important? Many networks, they already have automated system. In the case of Google, we have one, but it's only the one direction, so it's automated to us, but for the peers, it's like a manual setup. When we have to turn up like several BGP sessions with large providers in different places, it's like kind of a nightmare. So it will be good if we have like an API that is will be automated. Also, we use OAuth, and also we added the support of RPKI segment checklist from the feedback from the group. Also, initially, we were very linked to PeeringDB because that's how it born, using PeeringDB as the de facto database. But we split it, and now we are just using a peering database that it could be even a database that is owned by the IXS or a group of IXS. So basically, it's like a database that has peering information of locations and ASNs. Those are the overview. The changes from the last IETF, we added new elements based in the RFC 9234 that it specified the role of a peer or a BGP actor there. So we didn't invent the wheel because initially we didn't thought that it was needed. But then with the discussions there are some probably places where they want to turn up a route server, or maybe it's not really a peer, maybe it's a customer, or maybe it's a provider. So there are different roles that it can be in this BGP session. Initially, we thought all BGP sessions are the same. In fact, there aren't. So that's why we added that. We also changed the MD5 for a secret because probably we won't use MD5. And some work that we are working in RPKI Signet checklist and IP discovery is a discussion in the GitHub that we are having right now, exactly how we are going to do this. So those are the updates from the last IETF. And the planned work is review the flow of the API to make sure that it's because we did that in version 1, I think. So we need to do that, like check that everything is come to place. Also, we have to work on the RPKI signed checklist and the IP discovery. Also, we have a test. Facebook Meta has a running API. Still don't use it yet. We will let you know exactly when it's going to be ready, or probably it's already ready, but don't use it yet to check that running code. And also, basically from that, we are going to find out if we need to specify some things, because also developing the software, Meta has find some things that we have to fix. And later discuss if we are going to integrate the private peering in this document or in another document. Right now, the document is just a document, and we ask for working group adoption. So if you think that is ready for adoption, we think that is important work. So like APIs don't grow like crazy and they go different specifications. So I think that this is interesting, it's important because, well, peering is important, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that it will be like also good because it will automate some operations. And basically that's all. And I think that most important is like, I don't know, for you, like, how do we push for the adoption of the draft? If we send something more, you send something more.
Okay, so thank you so much for the presentation. On a personal level, I want to express appreciation for like the steep learning curve that the offer team has gone through in the last 1.5 years. And it's much appreciated that a lot of feedback visibly has been taken into consideration. We did start a working group call for adoption, what was it, 8 months ago? 6? I don't know. What we should do is start a new one with the document in its current form and take it from there. So
we submit well, I think that we submit or we are, or is there ready to send the version 6, I think. That is the last one.
Awesome.
Okay. With all the changes except the API discovery that's going to be new work.
And speaking as an individual contributor to the working group, the RPKI bits, there's been good feedback on the mailing list, like what should that look exactly like? And I expect that in the coming weeks, you'll receive assistance from me or Ben Madison to help her guess that piece of the puzzle. So you don't need to figure out everything by yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other comments, questions for Arturo?
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Then next up, Mr. Paolo Lucenti with offline BMP, EBIT, TLV. Take it away, BMP preacher.
Hello. So I didn't see the slide. Yes. New draft. Thank you. So new draft, making BMP usable offline. Now, little quirk, if you see the document, you will see there is making BMP fruible offline. Fruible, it doesn't exist in English, it's Italian English, so I apologize for that. But yeah, this thing, will never end. I know you will make fun of me forever. Anyway, so a brief history about this document. Last week at RIPE in Prague, a routing working group, there was a presentation about making, about MRT, the gaps in MRT, how can we make MRT great again? And essentially like a few people came to speak to me and, there was Rudiger, there was Ignace, there was Colin, Camilo, Luke. And so we just, it reignited a few topics. So let's look at BMP and raw BMP if we have to write it to disk. So what are our gaps there? So this is the motivation to just quickly write something. I started like super quick one night in my room in the hotel with a pint of Guinness, and then we spoke with Luke. And so, we put something together. What is the idea of this draft? Super simple, like peer-up messages, they build state, and the BGP sessions are long-lived. So at some point, let's send a recap of all the peers that have been sent by a BMP exporter at regular time intervals, every 5 minutes, every whatever, so that you make a milestone like in this picture, and you don't have to go back 3 months to find the peer up, right? So super simple. How the message of peer summary looks like. It looks like this. You have the common header, and then TLVs in TLVs. You have a peer TLV, and inside the peer TLV, you have their peer header and the peer up body. All those that have been sent up to the moment in which the message was crafted. So it's BMP version independent. It's super simple. You just, whether you do this at the station or at the exporter, you just record what you sent before, and you just, at regular time intervals craft this message. Since I wrote, I put together this thing. So there was one thing, it was the name, fruable, changed. Second thing, we got 2 comments already on the mailing list. The final draft 0 says that this thing should be done. It's a property of the BMP station, but we got 2 comments already this could be also a property of the BMP exporter. While I was typing very quickly over the pint of Guinness and everything like that, I had that idea in mind, but then with Luke, we said let's scrap it for a 0-0. So maybe we really want to reopen the door. Third thing, if you see the structure of this message, you have the common header and then all the stuff. Probably in there, we should put between the common header and the list of peers, a number of peers that we are going to, you have, that a receiver is going to expect. Pretty much what happens with the stats message. So we are, we behave like with the stats message, the structure is pretty much the same. And also it just makes sense because when the list is finished. So this is it about this draft. I don't know, shall I take a question now or?
Up to you.
Sure.
You're driving.
Yeah, okay, questions.
Hi, Ben, work online. Yeah, it's obvious why this is useful. I wonder if you've thought about error handling, in particular the case where a subsequent summary like this conflicts with the information you've already got in your state. Is that dealt with in the draft already?
No. In our long conversation with Luke, we thought about a number of scenarios where things can go wrong. Yeah. They are not in the draft yet, but you are totally right. I mean, things can go very wrong. So.
And question, I'm not familiar enough with the protocol anymore to remember whether the peer up contains things like timestamps for when the session originally came up.
Yeah.
So that's there's no additional data that you think you need to augment the original peer up notification with in order to make it useful after some time has gone by.
No.
Okay. Well, that sounds nice and simple then.
Yeah.
Luc Hendricks, NL Labs. It might be good to emphasize why we decided to drop the exporter version of the peer summary message type. We thought that it might be more complicated on the exporter side to do this kind of thing, and therefore it might be better to go with one proper option instead of half-assing two, for lack of a better expression. But said that, this is an assumption, and I think we very much welcome input from exporter, implementer side of things on whether this is an actual problem, yes or no, because it would be very nice to have this option in there, right?
Sure. All right. Anybody else on the queue? I see 2. No?
There's somebody remotely.
Hi, this is Prasad. Hi, Paolo. This is Prasad from Cisco. Hi, how are you? I had a question. Is this something the BMP collector sends to the other collector, but not from the router?
Yeah, this is exactly what we are talking about. In the draft, it's a property of the station, so of the collector, not of the exporter. But we already got 2 comments on the mailing list saying this could be a useful property of the exporter, so of the router as well. So this is what we are talking about. And like Luke was just saying, feedback from vendors, from router, from BMP exporters is very much welcome.
Okay. On the routers, we do maintain the state. Like you said, it's long-lived. So there is typically a database of peers with the capabilities which is maintained. So maybe we can discuss offline on some of the pros and cons of both approaches.
Sure.
I'll reach out to you.
Sure.
Thank
please.
you.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you. All right. So let's go to the TLV draft. Okay. So, I will not repeat why we are doing the TLV. I mean, the 4 legs of the table, making them all equal. So since IETF 119, we had the two open questions. So one is closed, like making groups of groups. I mean, it's just more harmful than anything else. So I would say question closed according to the feedback that I got. You can, do the same, just having more groups, a linear set of groups. We don't expect a lot of groups. This is fine. What we still have open, because we didn't receive enough feedback, is actually a door that Luke opened as part of his feedback, which is like, imagine that in a BGP PDU, BGP update PDU, you have reach, unreach, MP reach, and things like that. So how do we index, right? So at the moment, as the draft is there, essentially we index linearly, like we start really from the first NLRI of what the first set of messages, and we just go down and continue to count. Of course, there is an alternative. We can be a little bit more structured. We treat like reach as one set, unreach as a second set, and things like that. And then we count with the index inside the set, and then we number the sets. Or we can also mandate that there has to be just one set per BGP update PDU. So only reach, only unreach, only MP reach, and things like that. I'm not a fan of it, but for completeness, I put it there. I would say if anybody, I simply didn't receive much feedback. We talked a lot with Colin, with Luke about this. I very much welcome more feedback. I was looking at Maxence. We did let's say, export of BMP from FRR. Again, if BMP exporters, Prasad, if you are listening, I mean, I would very much welcome also your feedback on this. And I see you are already on the queue. Fantastic. Next slide is, yeah. So since 120, so since the last IETF, so if you see the draft, I didn't update it. I should update it, but there has been additional questions that they were opened, right? And especially with the offline draft, right? So what we did see is that, like, you review all the messages and you see that you have the stats messages TLV, the route monitoring is TLV, route mirroring is TLV, init and term they are TLV, but peer up and peer down they are not. So like the BGP open, the BGP notification in the peer down, they are not TLV. Would it be nice to take this opportunity to also nicely TLV all the messages? First question. Second question, we talk in the offline draft of injecting this peer summary, injecting it, for example, at the station in a feed that you receive from routers. So does it make sense to have a sequence number, right? Third thing, Swisscom does something very useful, which is post-mortem of incidents and things like that. And some of them include also what happened and what we did receive from the telemetry protocols. And so essentially, like in one of those postmortem, it was highlighted like, do we have all the timestamps that we need in BMP, yes or no? So those are three questions, and I mentioned there, so like it seems, so we will have a problem of backward compatibility, but it seems it's all low-hanging fruit, and we could go after them, I'm really looking for, feedback and opinions. So in other words, from BMP v4 with this long string, should we just say this is BMP v4 TLV support, or it's just BMP v4? So, we are adding, more, we get a little bit more ambitious and we just get a little bit out of the just TLV stuff, right? This is a whole topic where I'm also, looking forward for feedback if anybody has some. Questions, Prasad?
You have 2 minutes.
Sure. And
for your remaining slides and questions.
Yeah. Prasad?
Hey, Paolo, this is Prasad. First of all, I want to acknowledge that this is a great draft. I think this is something which will give us a lot of opportunity for many use cases. But having said that, there are a couple of things in the draft which does add a bit of complication on the router side. And I have the notes. I'll reach out to you offline to discuss some of that, and maybe we can work together and see how to simplify it.
Thank you so much, Prasad. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So the last one, it's super simple. Like it's, I presented this in the last IETF. This essentially, it's filtered routes. Let's not just constrain them to lockrib, but also to adribing and adribout. It makes everything consistent. It just makes sense. It's just one more flag. That's it. Shall we go for working group adoption? That didn't, it seems
Okay.
intuitive, right? So 35 seconds just to say the very last thing. Let's make this working group longer than just 90 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. Next up, Tobias Fiebig. BGP operational updates.
The other one first,
That's you?
please.
What?
The other one first, please.
There were two.
There were two sets of slides.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Look very similar.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. Let's start with the first one, which is a BGP operational security considerations update, keeping it short, together with Nick Hilliard.
Sorry.
Okay, slide recap. You might see these slides are pretty much the same as during the last meeting. We want to make it short enough for policymakers to read, generic enough to be resilient to specific technologies changing, testable independent of how it's implemented, and kind of published quick enough, so within months, not within years, to actually prevent some serious harm which might be arising from BCP 194 like it's currently looking. Idea was to split out the individual acts from the current basket. So we keep the core of the document that really focuses on the timeless policy part. And then we have informational documents with all the acts. Mostly like all the acts that you can use to actually implement it and all the terms we are kind of using, with the emphasis being again on being quick, like really quick. Well, version 3, there's some minor formulation changes. There's also a bit bigger editorial change, which we're still planning. And there's preliminary references to what I'm now calling ED, eternal drafts. This is the currently inserted text. What this basically says, like, well, this document does not tell you how to do it, because when we make a document that tells you how to do it, that will be outdated before we get this document out, which is kind of, not the point. So instead, you may refer to like the most recent non-expired draft version of 2 documents, which are in the non-adopted state here. And you must not use these documents if they are in fact expired, putting a little bit of an onus on the working group that might eventually adopt these drafts to keep them updated. And if they forget to update it, it won't run into eternal, well, funny recommendations that might get us to 64 into the GRT. So next steps. Well, ideally we get these documents, about which I'll be talking next, adopted. Make a call for adoption. So this is a call for an adoption call or something like that. Do some more additional editorial polishing on the draft, and yeah, then ideally move somewhere in the direction of a last call. And I would really like to hear opinions on whether this is or is not a good plan, because initially the objective was kind of to be quick, so we are not having to deal with policymakers implementing text we all know should not be out there anymore. And that's the first deck.
Your requests for issuing calls for working group adoption have been noted again.
Thank you again. This time I will pester you in case it doesn't happen.
Good.
Okay, towards our eternal drafts, Semper Renovet. Actually, one additional person. So Wolfgang Tremmel made the big mistake of having too much input. So he's now also a co-author. So we have the same starting point. We wanted to slim out BCP 194 or whatever document is in there, which brought us two additional drafts. One is the kind of basically everything which we took out of the previous draft. So around 45 pages of things you can do to make BGP secure without telling you that this is the only way to do it. And then there's a descriptive list of terms currently used within the community along with their common meaning, based on an idea by Nick. No idea to make this like an authoritative source of like, you should speak like this, but more like a look, this is how people speak. The idea is that these are indeed eternal drafts. So sometimes no document or do not use this document anymore is actually better than some stale document that makes recommendations nobody really wants to follow and that are actually kind of harmful if they are followed. And our routing world kind of tends to change fast. And we're not really good at doing maintenance to our documents. I mean, we are often already a little bit overcome with doing maintenance to our networks and documents. So the idea was to put an explicit TTL into the documents, kind of like a best before date. So in case we actually fall behind, we don't leave anything behind that might fall on our feet. And ideally using the power of draft expiration to keep people continuously work on that, because the current authors will get this nice email of like, this thing is about to expire in time. So we have first the routing OPSEC informational draft. What kind of happened there is that, as I said, it borrowed the structure from what was in the -01 draft of the OPSEC update. It's mostly focused on concrete ways, and it is expressly not prescriptive. So you can do this, but if you find any other way to accomplish the same thing, well, you do you, your network, your rules. It's also not really claiming completeness because there's always this one funny feature of one individual vendor or whatever that might actually make the same thing happen, and we might not have put it in there. Some of the things we are actually mentioning in the draft actually do the same thing. And we're also not trying to like judge whether doing something or not doing something is good or bad. Eventually, ideally, this should enable some form of rough consensus of like, well, at least we don't have a problem with this thing. And of course, all in the eternal draft state. So it doesn't really have to get like real working group rough consensus. Where it's it? Well, it's basically what was there before. There's lots of editing to do because there's always new techniques. There's also little things to keep up with. For example, ASPA is constantly evolving. Ideally, to get like the other draft forward, this should be adopted, and the calls for adoption have already been noted again. Bringing us to the terms, this is the one where Wolfgang joined in. And as I said, this is not about like telling people how to speak, even though I have heard some voices that it might also be interesting for the editors to have like something to use. This is not the objective. It might be nice, it might be like unofficially used as a guideline by them, but it's not the objective of this document, because if you go into that hole, you will, well, basically get into a bar fight. So as I said, what we do, I'm a dictionary, not a cop. Some people do this, some people do that. Make your own choices. Reason for that is, of course, that we happen to have a lot of terms that might have a lot of different meanings. Well, the peering with a peer that is a peer is different from the peering with a peer that is a downstream. It does. Unfortunately, this actually makes sense. And if you have new people writing new documents, yeah, well, sometimes they bring new terms, and at least having like some collection of like this is where we're at. And if it's only to say like, well, this kind of got a little bit too complex, maybe we have to think about making this a bit more, well, less authoritative, might be a good thing to have. So at the moment, as I said, I got Wolfgang Tremmel in. We also run an open survey on terms people would like to see in such a document. The URL is also still on the slides, and we are currently integrating those. We're kind of still pondering what the right structure would be, even though with a more dynamic approach, it's also not that difficult to change that. And there's a couple of terms we still have to add from the survey. Again, adopting it would be kind of nice to move the first draft forward. And with that, we have, I think, a little bit more than 11 minutes to figure out how we move forward now. How was that? If nobody gets up and complains, it's like a form of consensus. So I encourage you
Nice
all to
try.
get up and complain, because otherwise it's kind of this like boring limbo. The other option is that we drop this and we get /64s in the GRT. It's not a threat, it's just a prediction. Just saying.
Right. I think we have Alexander trying to.
You beat him, Ben, go.
Ben, welcome, man. I think the approach is roughly right. I think that the one gap, I think the kind of the everlasting internet drafts approach is probably a pretty good one. I think the one gap is some sort of a process for handing over authorship over time, which we might want to think about just as a working, not that we necessarily need to write down it in the draft, but we may want to even write it down in the draft so that we've got some kind of process to refer back to a couple of years from now. I had a brief read of the terminology one. There's nothing that made my eyes bleed, but it's pretty incomplete. There's quite a lot more work to do there. I worry a little bit about I understand all the reasons for which you want to be non-prescriptive, but I kind of feel like that could end up getting very, very hand-wavy as well, because it's going to end up being tempting to kind of delve into different terminologies that are used in different regions or in different fora. I think we want to constrain ourselves a little bit, kind of down from this is how some people might speak somewhere. I think there's a balance to be struck there that we probably haven't found yet.
So concerning the authorship, and that's maybe also something for the chairs, my understanding would be if the document gets adopted by the working group, it belongs to the working group. So it's relatively easy for the eventual chairs at some point in a undescriptive future to say like, well, somebody else submitted a new version of the draft, I will click this accept button. So I think there's not really that much of a threat, but I agree that it might be good to have some form of.
Alexander Azimov, Yango. So I read your draft just while you were speaking. So it's short, it's mostly precise. So this part is good. Unfortunately, I find it, even if I try to summarize what is written in the draft, it is just be a good citizen. Unfortunately, for me, it's not a straightforward instruction. And it's hard for me to imagine that I will give a reference for such a document to a network engineer. That's what makes me anxious.
Hello. Hi, Nick Hilliard, co-author of the shorter draft. That's actually intentional. The shorter draft is intended to be a statement of principles without a huge amount of detail, and the detail is intended to be in the subsequent drafts. So you could look on this as saying, well, okay, yeah, sure, it's be a good citizen, but these are the areas where you have to be a good citizen in, and the other document over there is going to describe what you need to do, or a set of things that you could do to actually fulfill that requirement to be a good citizen. So it is fully intentional that it's like that.
Yeah. So to illustrate, like the -01 was a lot longer. It had 55 pages and had all these implementation considerations, and it made some people unhappy enough to speak up loud enough to actually become co-authors. The problem we are trying to fix is BCP 194, and BCP 194 has some interesting concrete recommendations to do, like that you, for example, should announce IXP prefixes to your cone. Ideally, this should be done with the route server AS. If that doesn't do it, well, you've got an AS on your own, right? And I believe that that kind of makes people unhappy. And the reason we took out of all these concrete things is that it's really hard to keep such a document updated, because at the time it was written in that initial document, it probably kind of made sense. But things changed in the meantime and we didn't update the document. That's why we want to have like this short thing and then like the more dynamic eternal draft behind that. Another problem with the document as it is now is that there's a thing called policymakers that might not be overly technical, that are also looking at these documents, and they are transferring that to policies which you then have to follow if you, for example, operate critical infrastructure.
Your last statement makes me even more anxious, because there is a lot of must verbs in the document that can be easily translated that if you do not follow, for example, full verification of the ICE path, you will be prosecuted. So if these policymakers will read it straightforward, it may result in a very funny results.
Well, in the document, it doesn't say something about strict verification of the ASPA.
No, I'm not speaking about ISP. I'm speaking about the so I need to adjust my laptop. So, but I was just reading that if you're receiving a ICE path, it must something. So it was not specifying the mechanics to check that the ICE path is correct, but it must something to be correct.
Unless you have this special arrangement thingy that makes the exceptions clear.
Yeah. So if we are especially addressing policymakers with the verb must, they can read it, or the network engineers must do it. Otherwise, it must be punished.
I don't know what the feeling of the room is. I am personally of the opinion that you must not announce things you should not announce. It's something that can be relatively easily edited into a should, but it would be good to hear a couple more different voices for that.
We shall continue this on the mailing list.
And do a call for adoption on the mailing list, please. Thank you.
Pinky promise. All right. This wraps up the IETF Grow session at 1:1. The next one is going to be in Bangkok. So I hope to see all of you there, and have a great day. Thank you for your attendance and participation. It is much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Last meeting we have presented the destruct, and after the presentation I have sent an email for request the working adoption.